Centuries ago, when the ancient land of China lived under the constant shadow of invasion, one decision changed the course of history forever. It was the decision of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, a ruler obsessed with unifying the nation, even if the price was measured in human lives. He knew that the greatest threat came from the northern Xiongnu tribes, and so he commanded the creation of something the world had never seen before. A wall not built only of stone, but of fear, determination, sacrifice, and ambition. Thousands of laborers, farmers, soldiers, and prisoners were forced into a single workforce. Historical records say that so many people died during its construction that the wall was later called the longest cemetery on earth. Yet their struggle was not meaningless. Behind every brick was a scream, and beneath every stone was a story. Slowly, through blood, sweat, and unbearable suffering, a colossal structure began to rise. One that touched the horizon and challenged the mountains themselves. This was the birth of the Great Wall of China. A symbol, a sacrifice, and an uncomfortable question that echoes through history. Does power always demand a price? Qin Shi Huang, 221 to 210 BCE Xianyang. Northern frontiers of China. The wind on the northern frontier was sharp enough to cut through bone. It was the spring of 221 BCE, and the newly crowned emperor, Qin Shi Huang, stood on a raised platform overlooking the rugged landscape of Xianyang, his capital. The plains stretched endlessly toward the horizon, where dark clouds hovered like a warning. These were the same lands where the Xiongnu horsemen had raided Chinese villages for generations. Swift, merciless, unstoppable. For centuries, the states of China had fought among themselves in the Warring States period, building small defensive walls along their borders. But now, for the first time in history, all 7 states had been united under one ruler, a ruler whose name would echo across time. Qin Shi Huang's voice cut through the roaring wind. We will build a wall that will last for 10,000 generations. His ministers exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen the emperor's ambition, but this was beyond anything China had ever attempted. Among those standing near him was General Meng Tian, a brilliant commander known for his discipline and harsh methods. The emperor turned to him. General Meng Tian, he declared, you will lead the northern defense. You will drive back the Xiongnu, and you will build the long wall. Meng Tian bowed. By your command, your majesty. And thus began a construction project that would shape history. The order goes out throughout the empire. Decrees were carved into stone tablets and carried by riders across thousands of miles. The message was clear. Every able-bodied man would contribute to the building of the wall. Farmers were taken from their fields during the winter months. Prisoners were marched in chains toward the mountains. Soldiers who had survived years of warfare found themselves with shovels instead of swords. Even scholars who dared to criticize the emperor's rule, especially after the infamous book burning of 213 BCE, were sent north as punishment. One such man was Li Wan, a young historian from the former state of Zhao. On June 5, 214 BCE, he was among hundreds of prisoners taken north. His crime was simple. He had questioned the emperor's policies. As he walked the long road toward the frontier, Li Wan wrote secretly on scraps of silk hidden under his clothes. Our journey leads us not to a wall, but to our graves. Yet perhaps someday the world will remember that this wall was not built only by imperial will, but by the breath of dying men. The harsh frontier the construction began near the region known today as Gansu province, stretching eastward toward Shaanxi, Hebei, and eventually the Liaoning region. The terrain was unforgiving. Sharp cliffs, deserts, and frozen mountains challenged the workers at every step. By autumn of 214 BCE, thousands had already died from exhaustion, frostbite, snake bites, and rock slides. Their bodies were often buried near the construction sites. Some stories say even within the wall, though historians debate this. General Meng Tian rode along the workforce, shouting orders. Faster! The emperor waits for progress. The workers would look at one another with hollow eyes. They knew failure meant death, and success often meant the same. Among the workers was Zhang Luo, a farmer from the former state of Qi. He had been taken from his village on August 12, 214 BCE, leaving behind a pregnant wife. Every night, as he laid on the cold ground with only a thin cloth for warmth, he whispered to himself, "If I die here, will my son ever know my name?" A wall rises. Brick by brick the workers shaped earth, stone, and wood into long stretches that snaked across mountains like a sleeping dragon. In the east, walls stood as tall as 20 feet, while in the west, natural cliffs were carved and connected. Every region had its own style. Shaanxi, rammed earth walls Hebei, stone blocks Gansu, layers of gravel and reeds by spring of 213 BCE. The wall had stretched hundreds of miles. But with every new mile came another tragedy. On April 17th, a section near modern-day Datong collapsed, crushing 37 workers. Their supervisor, a strict officer named Zhao Liang, recorded the event but hid the truth in his report to avoid punishment. Li Wen, the historian prisoner, wrote about it that night. The wall is rising, but humanity is falling. If this structure stands for 10,000 years, may the world remember those who vanished beneath its weight. The emperor's inspection in 210 BCE, just months before his death, Qin Shi Huang decided to inspect the northern defenses. His convoy traveled along the newly built sections of the wall. Workers were ordered to smile, to cheer, to hide their injuries. When the emperor reached the mountain pass near Jiayuguan, he stood in silence for a long moment. The wall curved across mountains like a scar. He could feel its strength. He could feel its message. China will stand united. But below him, hidden in the shadows of the stones, were unmarked graves. Thousands of them. As the emperor moved on, Li Wen watched from a distance, chains around his wrists. "He sees only the wall," Li Wen whispered. "But someday, someone will see the truth." Han Dynasty, 141 to 87 BCE, Emperor Wu of Han Gansu, Hexi Corridor, Jiayuguan, the winter of 141 BCE. A cold Monday morning in the capital Chang'an marked the rise of a new ruler, Emperor Wu of Han, known to history as Han Wudi. He was young, ambitious, and determined to finish what Qin Shi Huang had started. Where the Qin had built the first foundation of the wall, Emperor Wu wanted to expand it, strengthen it, and turn it into the shield of a rising empire. The northern skies were restless. The Xiongnu, still powerful under their chieftain Xiongnu, launched raids across the borders, burning farms, stealing cattle, and capturing villagers. Reports from May 2nd, 140 BCE, described an attack near Xiongnu Commandery where 312 civilians vanished overnight. The emperor read the report in silence, his eyes cold. The wall must grow and the frontier must be secured, he finally said to his ministers. And so began the second great chapter in the history of the Great Wall. Marched to the Hexi Corridor in 135 BCE, General Wei Qing, one of the most skilled commanders of the Han Dynasty, was sent west with thousands of soldiers. Their target was the Hexi Corridor, a narrow stretch of land between the Gobi Desert and the Chilean Mountains, located in present-day Gansu province. This corridor was the lifeline of ancient China. Whoever controlled it controlled the future Silk Road. On September 18, 134 BCE, Wei Qing wrote in his campaign journal, "The land is harsh, the winds unforgiving. Yet if we do not claim Hexi, China will never know peace." Following his victories, Emperor Wu ordered the construction of massive new wall sections in Gansu, extending toward Dunhuang. This was not just defense, this was a message. China was rising again. The builders of the West, tens of thousands of laborers were sent to the West. Among them was Chen Rue, a former blacksmith from Hunan, accused of supplying weapons to rebels. On February 10, 133 BCE, he was chained and marched 1,300 kilometers to the construction site near Jiayuguan Pass. The days were scorching. The nights froze the skin. Workers mixed sand, gravel, and reeds to form what would later be known as layered earth walls, a signature of the Han Dynasty. One evening, Chen Rue watched the sunset bleed across the desert sky and whispered, "If this wall stands for 1,000 years, may it remember the names we leave in its dust." Nearby stood Commander Zhao Puchu, a strict officer known for recording every death. On March 4, 132 BCE, he wrote, 27 workers died of dehydration, 13 buried in a sandstorm, 5 crushed under falling stone, 2 executed for attempting escape. The desert is not our enemy, Zhao Puchu noted. Our enemy is time, and time always wins. The tragedy of Jiayuguan. By 127 BCE, the wall had reached the gates of Jiayuguan, a region that would one day become the westernmost fortress of the Great Wall. Legend tells that when engineers calculated the number of bricks needed, 1 brick was left unused. When asked why, the chief engineer Yi Chu replied, "The heavens have allotted this brick. We dare not alter their plan." Construction here was brutal. Sandstorms wiped out entire camps. On July 11, 127 BCE, a storm raged for 9 hours, killing 76 workers. Their bodies were buried in shallow graves marked only with wooden sticks. General Wei Qing visited the site 3 days later. Standing before the mounds of sand, he said softly, "May their sacrifice guard China more faithfully than our swords." The Battle of Mai, a turning point while construction continued, the Xiongnu did not remain silent. On May 11, 133 BCE, a Saturday dawn, the infamous Battle of Mai unfolded near what is now Shuozhou, Shaanxi. The Han army planned an ambush for the Xiongnu leader, Junchin Chanyu. Writer-officer Han Ongwa recorded, "Before sunrise, the fields were silent. By midday they had turned red. The ambush failed, the Xiongnu escaped, but the message was clear. The war was far from over." The wall, however, became more important than ever. The Silk Road is born in 121 BCE. General Hua Zubing, nephew of Wei Qing and one of the greatest cavalry commanders in Chinese history, marched westward with lightning speed. He liberated the Hexi Corridor from Xiongnu control. On June 8, 121 BCE, at the battle in Gaolan, Hua Zubing defeated the western Xiongnu prince, securing the corridor permanently. Emperor Wu celebrated the victory by ordering new wall sections and additional beacon towers. Fire signal stations built atop hills from Zhangye to Jiayuguan. That year, trade caravans from the west entered China through the newly secured corridor for the first time. Spices, textiles, and rare stones crossed the desert. And so, the Great Wall did not only defend China, it opened China to the world. A scholar's final words in 118 BCE, an elderly scribe named Lu Zhan, who had accompanied the military as a chronicler, died near Lintao. His final writing, dated December 3rd, still survives in fragments. The wall stretches across heaven and earth. Its strength lies not in stone, but in the bones beneath it. Tell future generations, this was not built by emperors alone. It was built by every man who breathed his last for China. His simple words became a silent eulogy for thousands. The chapter ends by the time Emperor Wu died in 87 BCE. The Great Wall had expanded far beyond the Qin Dynasty's vision. It stretched through deserts, mountains, and lonely passes. It was no longer just a wall. It was a symbol of China's determination and of the countless souls buried beneath its shadow. If the journey through the Great Wall, from Qin Shi Huang's vision to the Ming Dynasty's triumphs, captivated your imagination, there's so much more awaiting you. Picture yourself walking along the walls of Gansu or Jiayuguan, feeling the wind, hearing the whispers of soldiers and laborers who shaped history with their sweat and sacrifice. These stories, rooted in truth, transport us across centuries into the lives of emperors, generals, and ordinary people. If this tale moved you, hit like. It encourages us to share more calm, immersive historical journeys. Subscribe now, so you never miss a story that blends history, human courage, and timeless wisdom. Comment below where you are watching from and what time it is. It's amazing to see how far these stories travel. Share with friends who love history, and together, let's honor the generations whose efforts built the world we know today. History lives in every story, every stone, every lesson.